You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Friday, November 16th, 2018. It is also the feast of St. Margaret of Scotland. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have had a lot of fun talking about our Catholic Church. We talked about how we belong to the largest denomination of Christians in the world, how we were founded by Jesus Christ, and yet how we are a church of human beings whom we need to be praying for. We also talked about how we belong to a universal church that is the same no matter what language or what part of the world you are in. We also talked about how the sacraments are the glue that hold us together as faithful people. And yesterday we talked about the Pope. We talked about what the Pope can do, what the Pope can't do, and also our responsibility to pray for our Pope. Today, we are going to talk about how our church is unchanging. Unchanging. Now, this might be confusing because if you are old enough to remember, you probably know that about less than 10 years ago, the Catholic Church did adjust a little bit of the wording throughout the consecration of the Mass. You probably know it so well now that it's hard to even remember what we said for years and years before that. But we're talking a little bit broader. The reason why we tweak wording sometimes is because we are using words from the Bible. And the Bible was not written in English. The Bible was written in Greek or Aramaic. These languages very different from English. And all the levels of translation, all the times it's been translated, all the different languages it's been translated into, sometimes the words that we're using aren't quite perfect. So scholars help us get them a little bit better, and then we tweak. We're talking about kind of a larger idea that the church your grandparents attended is in so many ways the same as the church that you are attending now. That when the early apostles and disciples, in the years directly after Jesus ascended into heaven, when they would gather and break bread, it is so similar to what we continue to do in our churches today. People look different. We live completely different lives than they lived back then. And yet what matters, what sits at the absolute core and center of our faith is unchanging. Now, to illustrate this, we are going to look at our saint of the day, St. Margaret of Scotland. Let me tell you a little bit about her. So St. Margaret of Scotland lived a long time ago. She lived in the year 1045, which is about 1,000 years ago, over 1,000 years ago, a long time ago. And here's what her life looked like. She lived in what we would call the Dark Ages. There was no running water. There was really no communication, at least not quick communication with the outside world. There was absolutely no technology. If you wanted to get somewhere, you either walked or rode a horse or took a boat. There was no phones. There were hardly any books even. Books were precious. Now, St. Margaret of Scotland was a queen. She was born in exile, and she herself became the mother of 4 kings. Now, what's most remarkable about her is not the time she lived in. Lots of people lived at that time. They also didn't have modern medicine, so lots of people died at that time too. But what's remarkable of St. Margaret of Scotland is that she was very dedicated to her faith. She lived and practiced her faith very, very much. And what she was most dedicated to in her faith were 2 simple things: to Mary and to the Eucharist. Now, those things have been completely unchanging in the over 1,000 years since Margaret of Scotland lived. The Eucharist is the same. The teaching, the belief on the Eucharist is unchanged. Our relationship with Mary, the way that she both played a role in our salvation history and also can play a very personal role in our own salvation, that is unchanged. Language can change, culture can change, technology can change, but here's one thing that will never change: the truth. The truth can never be changed because it already is the truth. And that is the church. The church is the true church. It will not change. 1,000 years from now, when who knows what they're doing in flying cars or living on the moon, the church will remain the same. Now, the major guiding force for our church, we believe, is Mary, our mother, the mother of Jesus, and the mother of all Christians. So, as you're praying for your church, as we've been talking about this week, as we're praying that the Lord guides the church, as we're praying that the Lord guides the Pope, I want you to bring these prayers specifically to Mary. One of the titles that we have given Mary is Mary, Mother of the Church. So we say, Mary, please guide the church, please guide the Pope, and help us to be the beautiful institution that Jesus Christ founded. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. And finally, a quick heads up to the parents. As we work our way through November, we of course are looking forward to December and Advent. Here on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we will be spending all of Advent exploring the Jesse tree, meaning we will be talking about many of Jesus' ancestors as a way to prepare our hearts to welcome him at Christmas. If you would like to explore the Jesse tree even further at home with your family, I encourage you to look into a beautiful new resource. It's a devotional book for Catholic families that explores the Jesse tree. It takes the stress off of you, gives lots of biblical context, and also is designed to truly teach children about the amazing plan that God has had in place for our salvation from the very, very beginning. To explore this book and the ornaments that go with it, head to DoSmallThingsWithLove /Jesse-Tree.